All right, it's going. Welcome to the Thunk Tank.
Welcome to Thunk Tank Podcast, brought to you by Steaks and Skee Ball.
All right. So this episode, we had on author Kevin Clouther.
Yes.
I thought it was a great episode.
We had some good conversation, some deep stuff.
We talked a lot about sort of the craft in craft writing and craft beer.
Craft music.
Just craft in general and technique, right?
Yeah.
Versus sort of the more emotional, like, for music, you have expressivity of how you phrase and make sound.
Yeah, we really discussed artistry and
artistry in general.
Forms,
yeah,
which was kind of cool to get the perspective of somebody who is a writer, but he's been at it for quite some time. And
teaching it too.
Yeah, teaching it. Yeah.
Which is, I think, a important way to sort of get the full spectrum of what exists out there.
And, and we'll link his book in.
Yeah, we talked about his short story
below.
collection a lot. And so we'll put a link to that if you want to check it out and buy it.
Great short story collection.
Yeah, perfect.
I've read it.
Yeah, it's perfect for, like we say in the episode, reading a short story at night takes you about a half hour instead of watching Netflix, something like that.
Yeah, I will say, fair warning, we're not joined by Johnny Genie this
Unfortunately,
episode. Yes.
yeah.
He had being the brave genie that he is, he had to cover the shift for someone else, the genie shift.
Yeah, I mean, when you're a genie with the talent of Johnny, you got to follow your calling.
And if this is your first episode you're listening to, go back and listen to the other 17, and this will all make sense.
I'll put it this way.
Yeah.
We missed Johnny this episode because if you haven't heard our episode on ghosts, he's the one that kind of pushes us in the direction of ghost blowjobs.
Yeah, he really gets us to that point.
And only a genie can do that.
Only a genie has the power to do that.
So we missed him this episode, but
he'll be back next week.
He'll be back, and we'll make him have double the amount of beer to make up for it.
Make up for lost, what he does, for sure.
We also talked about music a lot, and specifically I talked a lot about the composer Gustav Mahler.
Yeah.
So if you've never heard his music, it's definitely worth checking out. We'll put a link in the description to just see some YouTube videos of what Mahler's like.
Yeah, tickle your music nodes. Yeah,
tickle your musical tickle points in the brain.
Yeah, well, because that gets into...
That's a scientific term.
But that gets into, obviously a lot of music has lyrics too.
Right, and we talked about lyricism and poetry and writing and lyricism and music.
Yeah, those cross sections and how they overlap and how they do sort of accomplish similar goals in terms of artistry in different ways. Through different means. So it's a interesting episode.
We also get into a debate on whether you should put cheese on an egg sandwich.
Yeah, there was a whole thing about egg sandwiches.
Yeah, it was really funny. We would be talking deep shit about Mahler, and then on a dime switch to how
butter side up or butter side down.
How to cook garlic on bread or shit like that.
Yeah.
Damn, I'm kind of out of it. We just got back from the gym.
Yeah. Well, I will say, if you like what you hear, check us out on Patreon.
And if you like the ghost blowjob direction, if you like what we do it even more in the drunk tanks, which are available on Patreon.
Yeah, patreon.com/thunktankpodcast. Like, share, and subscribe.
For as little as $1 an episode.
When I'm not drunk.
Yeah, like, share, and subscribe. It doesn't even slur off the tongue.
I know. It's amazing.
So every few episodes we'll just record a little bit of extra stuff, have more beer, and
I gotta be honest.
Get ridiculous.
I gotta be honest. Drunk Tank is the best part, so you should like, share, and subscribe.
I almost feel bad putting a paywall in front of it.
It's not a paywall so much as a wall that you have to pay to get past.
Sure. Yeah, I like that.
I mean, that was a sentence.
Like Trump's wall.
Except great again. Yeah.
Yeah.
America.
I don't know what we're saying.
No, we're a little gymmed out.
All right. I think we got it all, though.
Yeah. So I hope you enjoyed the episode. If you don't, then you are dead to me, and I'll see you in hell. And we hope that you join us next episode.
All right. Enjoy this episode with Kevin Clouther.
Yep.
Attention, humans. This is a Thunk Tank. Please insert this podcast directly into your nearest orifice for viewing pleasure.
Okay, you ready? Oh, shit.
Welcome to the Thunk Tank. Welcome to the Thunk Tank.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, there you go.
Come into our Thunk Tank.
Luke, don't switch to the other peanuts.
Welcome to the Thunk Tank. Come in the tank. We're thinking, and we're drinking,
And we're thunked.
Oh my god, I'm probably more beer than man if we go far enough back at this point. We never know when
Boom,
we're actually
we're live. Now we're live.
Oh, we're live? It's official?
By live, we mean we could delete this
Yeah.
if you say something bad.
This isn't actually
Welcome to the
streaming.
Thunk Tank podcast.
Yeah, welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Unfortunately, this episode, we have no
Johnny Genie.
magic of the Johnny Genie.
Yeah. He had to...
I guess
he was
somebody-
off in Genie World.
Somebody
He got lost.
Yeah, let's just say he's at a special genie training seminar.
Yeah. He gets paid. He gets a raise if he finishes this certificate program. I'm sorry. We have a guest here, and clearly we
Yeah.
should explain this better. So my brother is our third partner in podcasting, but he just had to pick up a shift at the bar tonight, basically. But we call him Johnny Genie because he does a Genie Would You Rather segment, and he tries to out-genie us because he's just good at it, honestly.
Well, the tradition of the genie goes back, I guess, all the way to like
The beginning.
the beginning of time,
Yeah.
and he gives he just has all power, which is the only way to make a would you rather work.
Yeah.
So I told Johnny maybe if he gets home from work early enough, he can quick call in a would you rather to us.
That would be great.
That'd be good.
Well, we can also have people call in now.
Maybe I didn't set it up today.
Anyways.
All right, so here we are. We're in the Thunk Tank. We're drinking delicious beer. We also have a guest,
Yes.
Sir Author Kevin Clouther. Welcome to Thunk Tank.
Yeah, thank you for joining us.
An honor, gentlemen.
Yeah, and so what are we starting here with, folks? We have, well, I have the can actually, so I guess I can explain. We have Sand City, a Diamond in the Rough. What is this, double dry hop, you said?
I don't know. Read the can, dude.
I don't want to do the work. It's a Citra Double Indian Pale Ale. 8.5%.
If anybody knows Other Half beer, it's kind of reminiscent of the Other Half DDH All Citra Everything, which is one of my favorite beers.
I think we featured that one, too.
Second to
Yeah.
Trillium.
Oh,
I know you've been to Trillium a
it's
few
great.
times, right?
Yeah,
One of my favorite beers from Trillium is called DDH Fort Point.
that's terrific.
Yeah.
So you're into beer, right?
I am.
So that's always helpful when we're getting guests that are already into beer.
Yeah. I've had a few potential guests who are, I say, oh yeah, come on, it's a good time, and they're kind of a little like, and then I say to them, you don't have to get really drunk on beer. You can either have one or none, or if wine
Also,
is
like
your thing,
we did a
whatever.
whole episode on cocktails, and we just
Yeah.
downed whiskey.
Oh god,
like
that was
Manhattans,
that was a disaster. That was great. If
It
you haven't
ended
heard
at
that
4
episode-
a.m.
Yeah,
If you haven't heard that episode, go back. What was it, 8 or something? It was called
Yeah.
The Art of Mixology.
yeah. The slurring really started early on.
Yeah,
that
I got
one.
home at 4:30.
Yeah,
Don't worry, that won't happen. We're gonna
Yeah.
stick to beer, and
Yeah, we'll be fine.
if
Yeah.
you stick to beer, you're in the clear, right? That's how the saying goes.
I've said a lot of things in my life, and the ones that rhyme, I trust the most.
Officer, I stick to beer. I'm clear.
Is that your go-to?
Yeah, that's my go-to line if I get pulled over at night.
I mean, hey, we're here. We've made it.
So we have a few other beers. I guess we'll just talk about them as we open them, probably, maybe. Or do you
Yeah.
want to just mention them now?
No, we can go through them as needed, I think, right?
I saw a Barrier Money in there.
Yeah, we got money.
That's a recurring beer guest on the podcast.
Barrier is doing some good stuff. They have a lot of new stuff out now that I haven't tried, but Money is pretty go-to. I'm a
Cool.
big fan of the Money.
So I did get your book about 2 weeks ago. I started reading some of the We're Flying to Chicago.
This is great. It came out 4 years ago, so this is the perfect time to.
Well, I
to
ordered
publicize
it. I ordered it 4 years ago, and
Yeah.
it only just came. Like the Amazon drone fucked up. It must have crashed or something.
Hey, that's why you can't trust the drones, unfortunately.
But Joe, the other night at a bar, you were showing me a short story named Sticks.
Oh, yeah,
Remember that?
the George Saunders.
Yeah.
And I just thought, I was reading some of your short stories.
Yeah.
I thought, man, I fucking love short stories.
Yeah.
Like the art of short stories. As a musician, though, I have a quick little video clip that I think I think it captures what I love about short stories. It was sort of my music translation of it.
Oh,
so I'm
that's
just going to play that real quick.
Yeah, go for
This
it.
is very multimedia.
I know, we're
Thanks
in
to the
now.
generous Patreon soundboard donator.
Like, share, and subscribe.
If you give us another soundboard, we'll just sell it and like make a profit off of it.
We've
right?
already discussed this, how we're not far off from becoming...
This is just a podcast front for a soundboard business.
Soundboard refurbishing fronts of sorts.
So this is a TED Talk with the famous conductor Michael Tilson Thomas, but I already have it queued up right to the spot where he's talking about the Beethoven Violin Concerto.
Okay.
And unflinchingly about who we really are. It's a language that's still... Now, over the centuries, it grew into the big pieces we always think of, like concertos and symphonies, but even the most ambitious masterpiece can have as its central mission to bring you back to a fragile and personal moment, like this one from the Beethoven Violin Concerto. So simple, so evocative, so many emotions seem to be inside of it. Yet, of course, like all music, it's essentially not about anything. It's just a design of...
So the main vibe I love, like, in music we call it program music versus absolute music, right? So like an opera, right, it has a plot, it has, like, that's just a moment from Beethoven's Violin Concerto, sort of about 80% of the way through the first movement. It's a theme you've heard a bunch of times, and it just comes back with this like very empty texture. And did you hear the sound he made halfway through playing it? He just goes like,
Yeah.
That's the sound I made when I read Styx.
Yeah.
That's the sound I make when I read like a perfect line from a book or something, where you're just like, it captures everything, even though you can't quite say how it did it, right?
Yeah. I think that's interesting too to point out with especially thinking about short fiction compared to like longer form prose like novels or something like that. So maybe that's a good question to start with, because I'm very curious what you think about a lot of this as somebody who does a lot of writing on both ends of that spectrum. So thinking about like short stories, I mean, and a collection like We Were Flying to Chicago, like where do you even start with something like that? Like, did you start with that piece itself, We Were Flying to Chicago, or like where does that even begin in terms of starting to formulate a collection like that?
I just want to say, guys, I'm so excited to be talking about craft beer, short fiction, and classical music, which are like 3 of my 5 favorite things in the world.
Yeah, right?
Yeah, why not merge these worlds, right?
I mean, the thing about someone like Saunders that I'm going to not answer your question, then I'll come around
Saunders
to it later.
is the author of this story I mentioned, Styx. We'll post it in the episode links.
Well, definitely. Like, it also, the whole point is to be derivative, so feel free to not answer any of my questions and just roll with it, yeah.
I mean, the thing about someone like Saunders, and this is by no means original what I'm about to say, is but he's such a truth teller. You read his fiction, you feel like you're getting the real story. You feel like the language is direct. You feel like the characters are accessible. You feel like it's completely unadorned. And when you read a longer piece, so much of it is about world building. But in short fiction, you don't have to do that. You just have to capture a moment or an experience or a character. So it's going right to the heart of things.
Right.
And so when I read Saunders, it's almost like you can't read too many in a row because it's just too much feeling.
Yeah.
Whereas if you read a novel, there are passages of, Anna Karenina, where for 200 pages it's like agrarian land reform. And I love Tolstoy, but you can get through those 200 pages in one sitting and your heart will be okay. But to read 200 pages of Saunders or someone like Chekhov, it's too much. You got to just sort of take a break. So each of the stories in my book were written in totally different states of mind, in totally different moments of my life. The first story I started when I was 21 and had just graduated from college, and the last story I finished when I was 34 and was married with a kid, you know.
Those are so different.
Yeah. So, I mean, you're talking about 10 stories.
Seismic shift.
Yeah, written over the course or revised over the course of like 13 years. And so they're just these different moments of the things I was seeing and the ways I was thinking over the course of my life. They don't have a lot to do with each other, truthfully, other than they all had something to do with what I was thinking about and caring about. And I do think that makes a story collection pretty different from a novel, certainly very different from a nonfiction project.
So the title, We Were Flying to Chicago, is also the name of the first story.
Yeah.
Was there a reason for that, or?
Yeah, I was flying to Chicago.
I figured the way you described everything.
Whoa, I did not see that twist coming.
The way you described
spoiler alert,
flying in that story.
Don't buy it. Don't.
I honestly I get some anxiety when I fly.
For sure.
And I started getting the same flying anxiety just because
there's so much going on.
That's exactly the thought process. I just start looking at everybody and just figuring out their life story and being like, how did that guy get fat? That guy hates his wife. And I just start picking apart.
Yeah.
Because you're in this small metal capsule.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
And not only that, in this story, the whole concept was fuck, we're going to Chicago, but we don't even want to.
That's right. Well, that's exactly what happened. I was flying from New York to Detroit, and while we were in the air, the pilot came on to say, guess what, guys? We're going to Chicago. And anybody who's seen a map of the United States understands that if you are flying to Detroit from New York and you wind up in Chicago, something's gone really wrong. And so everybody on the plane was very, very unhappy. And I took out a pen and a piece of paper, and I just started writing about what I was seeing around me.
On the shaky train.
Yeah, just all these people who were sort of upset about things. I wrote, I don't know, a couple sentences, a couple paragraphs. And that story is in the first person plural, which is a weird point of view to write in. But that's just because I didn't feel like I was in any one particular person's head. I was just kind of going from person to person inside the plane.
At 250 miles per hour.
And thinking about what
35,000 feet.
Right, what they were worked up about.
Yeah.
And then eventually I realized that I was way more interested in what the women were thinking about, and so I just made the first person plural women. But when it started, I was just trying to get down all this feeling, and I'm a big believer in writing in different places at different times. Right in the DMV, right on a train, right on a bus.
Well, a lot of
right
those places too, they're almost like human zoos in a sense, because you see people in these environments where different elements of who they really are going to come out. Like you go to the DMV and you're like, this is not far from Mad Max sometimes.
Yeah, and it exposes you to different stimuli. I mean, I know there's Jonathan Franzen said when he was writing the corrections, he wrapped his head in a turban and he was in this dungeon and he just stared at an empty wall and he didn't allow himself to look at anything but the page. And I get that. You're just totally beholden to your imagination. But I think going in the other direction is pretty useful too, where you're smelling different things, you're hearing different things, you're seeing different things, and then that invariably affects what you end up writing about.
It's like a lot of composers, they often use the language the idea came to me from somewhere else, right? And they often think it could be God gave me the idea, whatever. Sure. But really, I think it's stimuli come in, and then your subconscious will burp up an idea. Yeah. And then if you're lucky to have a pen and pad around, you'll write it down. If you're not, it gets lost like a dream that you forget. You know?
Yeah. And I never dream things and wake up and write them down. I mean, I'll wake up and I'll think, oh my God. Sometimes I wake up and I think, oh, I just dreamt this amazing story. But then I'll sit down to write it down.
And you're like, this is crap.
It seems stupid.
Yeah,
it seems stupid. Yeah. But I think that, the subconscious is working through things for sure. But they're not, at least in my experience, narrative. It's just all unfiltered.
It's funny you say that, because what I've learned from that, because I've experienced the exact same sort of just realization where I come to terms with the fact as I'm writing it down that this actually isn't that interesting.
Right.
But oftentimes there's like an extension of what I thought was interesting, where there might be some sort of kernel of truth within that I can work with. So it's more I try to contextualize and internalize that maybe.
And then sometimes it's just you played tennis with Billy Joel and you're like, I don't know what the fuck that means.
Yeah, it's like that's must mean something. No, we got nothing here.
Just take a shower and forget the dream.
Yeah, just move on. Try again next night. It's like it's not.
But they do say, I just finished this fascinating podcast with this sleep expert, this neuroscientist who studies sleep, and he was saying that what's happening when you dream is you have so many things in your subconscious in terms of information that is not just at your fingertips all the time. So I always give this example, like if I say the word Eiffel Tower, now the image of the Eiffel Tower just popped into your mind's eye. Where was it right before I said it? It was somewhere deep in the filing cabinet.
Yeah, the database.
And if I said, start writing down everything you know, like how long would it be till you write down, I know about the Eiffel Tower,
Right. When would it come up?
So in dreams, like you said, there's no narrative, right? Our sort of frontal lobes shut down as the logic of like past, present, future kind of goes away. But it's like your brain is working through, it's checking all the things it learned that day against all the things you already know and trying to like make that cohesive.
Well, sometimes I find there's a pseudo narrative where I'm like, oh, this is happening and then this is happening, and then all of a sudden you're just like playing tennis with Billy Joel and you're like, wait a minute,
and there's a dragon, and then
But I try to sometimes like bridge those gaps like as I'm dreaming even, and it's just like no, not even close.
Yeah,
it's just and then there's a dragon or a forest full of snake.
I hate
zombies.
Well, now hold on. So based on the Freudian notion of dreams as wish fulfillment, I feel like, Joe, you really want to play tennis with Billy Joel, and this is something that
I want to
work through.
I don't know if I want to play Billy Joel in tennis so much as I want to beat him in tennis.
Only if I win do I want to play Billy Joel in tennis. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't want to lose to Billy Joel in tennis. I feel like that would be that wouldn't help me in any way. But I feel like if I could walk around in my life saying, you know what I did once? I beat Billy Joel in tennis. People would be like, that means nothing to
They'd be like, oh, he's probably drunk or something.
Well, Billy Joel is definitely drunk if you're playing him in tennis. I can tell you that much.
I've got a Billy Joel tennis question. I'm allowed to ask questions, too.
You're absolutely allowed. In fact, it's encouraged.
So is there anything that you enjoy following only through listening to other people talk about it? Because I've realized that I only consume the NBA by listening to other people talk about the NBA.
Oh, that's
I never actually watch the NBA. And I really like reading David Foster Wallace's essays on tennis, but I hate watching tennis.
I
read a book, The Inner Game of Tennis by James Galloway.
Okay.
A lot of musicians read it.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
It's about like how do you learn, how do you teach, right? I read it basically for teaching. It's like
wow, that's cool.
But like I would never sit down and just watch like hours of tennis.
Yeah.
Right.
Maybe I would if I was dating someone who was really into tennis. I'm sure I could like get myself psyched up for it, but
right. Otherwise,
unless
Billy Joel's coming to bat. Wait, that's not even the right pun.
No. I mean, he writes about tennis so beautifully and so convincingly, and it's so interesting. And then when I sit down to watch tennis, even when I know the athletes to be transcendent, someone like Federer or Serena Williams, I'm like, this does not interest me.
Well, that's like, have you ever tried to watch, what's the one, cricket?
No, it takes forever, right? It takes like 10 days to play a game.
That's the British one, right?
Yeah,
it's like British baseball. I tried watching, I YouTubed. I was really drunk one night, and I was like, let me give it a try.
That's what you do when you're really drunk?
That really distinguishes one night from another for you, Joe.
Look, my expertise on cricket is solid because I was really drunk one night on YouTube.
Yeah.
And I YouTubed the most exciting cricket game ever to see what would come up. I'm like, let me just start with the peak cricket game. And you could
if I'm not sucked in by the peak cricket game, I'm not going to be sucked in.
But you could see like the people playing, even the refs, you could tell were into it. Like with their calls, they were, you know, they had to make their judgment calls, but they were like honed in on what was happening, and it was just like, this is so dumb. Like I just don't buy it.
Well, you also didn't know the rules. Like a lot of games, like if you watch chess and you don't understand the rules, it's not going to be very fun.
That's definitely true, but I did watch it.
That's certainly true.
Especially chess. I did watch a brief tutorial video before, and I was like, it's just like baseball, but like crooked. Like you can just hit the ball anywhere, which like they argue is what's better about it than baseball, because they're like, baseball's dumb. You have a triangle to like hit within. Like it's only like 90 degrees of the field.
And the games only take 4 hours, not 10 days.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And it's like, I'm good with how that
4 hours is still long, though.
It's really long.
It's too long.
I think it's why football's more popular than soccer.
Oh, there's a lot of reasons why.
There's a lot of reasons, probably, but
in America,
so many people hate soccer here.
Well, they hate. What's weird is that youth soccer is so popular here. It's more popular probably than youth football even. But the problem is, I don't think soccer is like commercializable, because football you have these set. Same thing with baseball. Baseball is meant for commercial breaks. You have every half inning you have a commercial break. Every time a new pitcher comes in, you have a commercial break. It's commercial gold.
Yeah.
For advertisers.
Baseball is God's gift to television and radio.
Oh, yeah.
Because there are those 18 breaks.
Yeah, 162 games.
162 games.
As compared to football's 16 or whatever, it's like it's just conducive to like American commercialism in terms of marketing.
Obviously, yeah.
Yeah. But soccer, it's like, what do you have? Like, I mean, comparatively, you have
really
no
can't
breaks.
Pause it, and that's part of the point of soccer is like the endurance, like
which is weird because hockey's like still pretty popular, but it's not as
well. They programmed in like the timeouts and the stopping all constantly.
But also hockey's awesome.
Yeah, hockey's cool too. I mean, it's like lacrosse. I love those sports. It's like football with a weapon, more or less.
Hey, shout out to the Stony Brook women's soccer team, ranked #1 in the country.
Really?
Really? I didn't know that.
Mm-hmm.
Congrats.
Yeah. I think that's true. I think it's true. I'm pretty sure Are there fact checkers on this program?
Actually, I asked Bianca if she wanted to be our Jamie tonight. That's like the fact checker on Joe Rogan's podcast.
She would be great at that because she would just be so like kindly go.
She said no very quickly.
She was just nodding. She's like, I have so many things I'd rather do.
She was like, what would that entail? I was like, you basically sit
is.
there in silence and maybe once every
but she could drink wine while
minutes.
She does it.
That's what I said.
Yeah, we would buy her wine.
I think certain sporting plays are intuitively exciting. I'll give you 2 examples. When something really awesome happens in a football game, I'll bring in my wife, who is not typically somebody who watches football games. I'll say, watch this. And about half the time, she at least smiles or nods and suggests that she also thought it was interesting.
That was cool, right?
Yeah, that was cool.
Yeah.
And then the second thing is, I once saw Lenny Dykstra try to pick up a girl on Twitter by sending her a video of his home run. And I just thought that was really cool. Like,
did your wife think that was cool?
I don't know that she saw it. I think it's all there on the internet for anyone to see.
Right.
But I kind of get it. Like, you watch the home run, and even though it probably happened 30 years ago in his life, it is pretty exciting. Like, the ball goes over the wall, people cheer, he does a little victory lap.
Most sports, I think,
and
have
it's like
that
not
too.
the Little League version of doing that. That's like the real deal.
Yeah, this is a grown man who, this is his career, and he gets paid way more money than anything you will ever make, times like 10.
Hey!
Hate to break it to you.
I play trumpet.
Yeah, well, good luck with that. Good luck getting that home run money.
Even if I somehow become the best trumpet player in the world, there's no way I'm making that amount of money.
No, not even close. Yeah, that's the thing. You should get better.
Unless I hit a baseball home run
with your trumpet.
With my trumpet.
Yeah, then you'll make money.
Yeah, it'll be like $2,000 per destroying a trumpet, but I mean, if I can repeatedly do that, that's pretty good.
You're basically a circus act.
I'll beat Billy Joel in tennis with my trumpet.
You might as well at that point. Yeah.
So who's like the Babe Ruth of trumpet? Is it like Miles Davis? Who's the most famous, most accomplished trumpeter of all time?
So I can definitely give you that answer from the classical world of trumpet, which is what I'm in. Okay. And that would be, I mean, of course, there are just like a bunch of names in the top 10, but I would say if you ask trumpet players, like, give me your go-to, it would be Bud Herseth.
Okay.
His full name is Adolf Herseth, but everybody called him Bud.
Understandably.
He was the principal trumpet of the Chicago Symphony for so long. He didn't retire until he was like 80, I think, which is insane for playing trumpet. It's such a physical...
He still had the lung capacity or whatever.
Not only the lung capacity, but it's such a strain on your
mouth,
face.
Right?
And
your lips and...
The recovery, like every time you play, it takes a lot of recovery and all that. So it was pretty remarkable that he played to that age. But certainly Miles Davis is like a dinner table name, let's say, right? Okay. In the jazz world, you have... well, I guess Miles would be the jazz version, although there's plenty of others. But right now, alive today, I would say my favorite trumpet sound might be Chris Martin, who's the principal trumpet of New York Philharmonic.
Oh, there you go.
he came from Chicago, actually. He was the principal trumpet in Chicago Symphony.
Yeah.
And then came to New York, I think, a year ago or 2 years ago, which was like a shocking move because Chicago's regularly ranked like in the top few orchestras in the world.
Wow. That was after.
I mean, both jobs are amazing, but
that was after he quit Coldplay, right?
Yeah, different Chris Martin.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
There's two? Well, that's unacceptable. He should probably change his name to Bud Martin.
The Chris Martin from
Christopher Martin.
Or Adolph Martin.
Adolph Martin. Buddy Martin, yeah.
Buddy
Bud
Martin.
Martin, yeah.
Buddy M.
Yeah.
Come on.
Okay.
Get with it.
Back to the short story thing. Music has like, okay, so if you're reading like a novel, right?
I've never done that.
Like you said, you have to get into the whole world of the novel,
they're good,
right?
yeah.
It's like, it takes a lot of buy-in, right? So for me, I have a stack of books that I'm always like, when am I going to start this, right? Like, if I know I'm going to the beach every day for a few weeks in the summer, it's like I get an hour of reading a day. Cool.
Okay.
If I know I'm flying,
Yeah.
like, okay, I'm taking like
Yeah.
6 hours of flights here, 6 hours
great.
back. Great for a novel. But in my regular busy life, novels can be tricky. So there's moments within the novel
Yeah.
that I'm like, holy shit, that's a fucking meaningful
Yeah.
line right there.
Yeah.
Sort of like listening to a Mahler symphony, let's say. Right?
Yeah. Yeah, there
Really
are those
hard
moments.
to sit down and
for
just
sure.
listen to a Mahler
Yeah.
symphony for multiple reasons.
Yeah.
But then
We'll link
once
it in
you
the
know the whole
description.
Mahler symphony, you can sort of go back and find on YouTube the moment that you want to hear, and in the context, you're like, it's more meaningful. I love the short story because, like, last night I had read like 3 or 4 of your short stories from this Flying to Chicago collection. And then I got home like earlier than I thought last night. It was like 11. I was like, hey, I want to read one more of these stories instead of watching Netflix. And it took me like 30 minutes.
That's great.
Yeah.
And like that's what I love about
that's one
the short
Netflix,
story.
but not bad.
So what I think the short story
It's the new Netflix. I hear you.
is the new Netflix.
There you go.
How do we bring short
about
stories to
time.
be the new Netflix? What I was going to say was like, unlike in a scientific thing or a philosophy thing where you want to take a concept and fucking like reduce it down and distill it and nail it down to say exactly what it is, in like a story, all you have to do is like gesture at it and like just like pointing at the thing, whatever that quality about being a human is, you gesture at it, and then the reader can be like, huh. And it's like one of those things that's so hard to reduce down anyways that it's like through the short story you just get an essence, a sense, a feeling of
Try teaching it.
Because that's exactly what the students say about it. They read the story and they say, I feel like this is better than watching Netflix. It's always the first thing they say.
Yeah.
And then the second thing,
one. Wow.
then they just start talking about the essence of it. And you're like, my work here is done.
Yeah. You're like, well, that
Take
was
it from
easy,
here,
yeah.
boys and girls.
Did I get a raise for this? I think I nailed it. Yeah. If only, right?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I will say about in the tradition of not answering your question, not that there necessarily was a question.
Right. But nevertheless.
question mark there. That's a question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I certainly think there are novels that are like, Mahler symphonies where you just have to be in the right time in your life to sit down and read them. Like
Yeah,
if you read
definitely.
Thomas Pynchon when you're not ready, you're going to be like, this is garbage. This is nonsense. It doesn't make any sense.
It's
Just
like
right.
it's like Mahler being sound waves. It doesn't connect.
Yeah, I mean, I listened to Mahler, I don't know, scores of times before I felt anything. I was like, I don't get it. I don't get this
Right,
guy.
yeah.
I mean, it didn't. I felt that way about Beethoven. I didn't feel Beethoven symphonies for a long time. Whereas there are other, stories I read where they hit me immediately, even when I was very young. And there are, pieces of music I listen to. Obviously, this is true probably just about everybody, where they hit you when you're very young. So, yeah, I mean, stories oftentimes are more immediately accessible, but it's definitely worth buying into some of those worlds that the writers create, because the achievement is just so extraordinary. I mean,
Sure.
once you're in Flaubert's imagination, you just think to yourself, well, this is the most magical thing that's ever happened to me. I mean, here I am, I'm in the 19th century, I'm in France.
I'm there, yeah.
I'm in the world of this genius. Every sentence. One of the coolest things. Lydia Davis is cool in a million different ways. She's a very accomplished short story writer for the podcast listeners at home who might not be familiar with her. She writes these very, 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 very short stories, sometimes only one sentence long.
Oh, wow.
But she also translates really long French novels, and she translated the first book of In Search of Lost Time, and she translated Madame Bovary. And one of the cool things she did in her translation, Penguin let her do this, is she italicized. I think I'm getting this right. If I'm getting it wrong, I'm close.
We've said so many wrong things on this podcast.
Yeah.
You have nothing to worry about.
Yeah.
You're
way ahead of the curve.
I may be wrong about the women's lacrosse team ranking. And,
You said soccer.
And okay,
Yeah. For the record.
I think it is lacrosse, by the way.
I think it is lacrosse.
Because soccer is not this season yet.
I think it's women's lacrosse. That's what I meant. And
But whatever.
Also, Lydia Davis / Penguin Random House's use of italics. But Flaubert would italicize, and Davis preserved this, the sentences or phrases or clauses that he felt like he'd taken from somewhere else and that he had to sort of use for the sake of keeping the novel going, but that nevertheless galled him because he just wanted the whole thing to be this sort of fully formed, fully imagined world that the reader could buy into. And that's how concerned he was on the language level in a book that's, I don't know, 75, 80,000 words, something like that.
Wow.
Yeah. It's like when you think to Brahms, who there's just so many works of Brahms that were burned in his fireplace.
Oh my God.
And you just think,
Oh, he was a burner?
yeah, and probably they were great, right?
Yeah.
You hear of pieces that the composer themselves, like Beethoven was famous for writing an E flat and scribbling it out and writing an F and then scribbling that out and writing an E flat again. You could see this in his manuscripts, whereas Mozart was just this, genius who just was like a machine that put out, I don't mean to say that as if his music was emotionless or something like that, but...
No, but he just was so in his, zone.
He was the type of guy that could just, go to a concert, hear it, come home, play it on his keyboard, and write it down. There was just a genius level, something else going on, I think.
I mean, I think about Mozart a lot relative to writing, because Mozart did things at 12 that there's no analog to anything a writer has ever done at 12.
Yeah.
I mean, the best thing Mozart did at the age of 12 is so much better than the best thing any writer ever did at the age of 12. Well, I just don't understand
Well, that's
how.
interesting. Are there any... Because it's funny you say that. I had a professor who, brought this point up when I was, I think, my freshman year, and he made that connection about, or that lack of connection about how, you have savants who compose music when they're before double-digit age, but what savant writer is there who was writing great works at the age of 12?
I mean, John Keats's whole oeuvre was finished before he was, 24, something like that, right? And he wrote some of the most enduring poems in the English language, when he was really young. Yeah. But he wasn't 12.
Right.
He was 23.
Yeah.
I mean, 12 is outrageous.
I mean, I think language is such a...
Yeah,
it's
I
such
think
a
that's
complex,
a big factor.
It's such a complex tool, right?
Words,
of
I think,
expression.
probably come later, develop later than the grammar of music.
And the
It
right
could be
words
something
if
like
you're
that,
writing,
right?
Because the grammar of music, of course, it can be infinitely complex, right? When you look at Bach or something.
Yeah, but there's books I've seen students in my classes have where it's the mathematics of music.
Sure, but you don't need to know about the mathematics to know your voice leading and harmony rules.
Oh no,
and
of course not.
I was also going to say, when you look at the things Mozart wrote when he's young, you don't get anything close to a Mahler symphony.
Right.
You don't get somebody cutting to the core of what it means to be a human.
Of that
you get really
complexity, that
crafted,
emotional complexity.
Yeah, the emotional complexity is not necessarily
You wouldn't
there.
have it at that point.
Mozart
how would
couldn't
you?
have written his Requiem when he was 12.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And what you get is really
That would have been
genius.
interesting if you tried.
That would have been really interesting.
It would have ended with and then I got my grilled cheese or something,
Because Mozart was eating grilled cheese.
Maybe he was. How do you know?
Did they have grilled cheese? Where the fuck did he live? Austria?
Salzburg or something.
Yeah. They have cheese there.
Yeah, they have cheese and bread. Come on.
Yeah. I'll take a Salzburg grilled,
I'll take a
please.
Salzburg grilled cheese a la Mozart.
A la Mozart. If we ever start a podcast grilled cheese place, we have to have the Mozart.
If we start a podcast grilled cheese place, what the fuck are you talking about?
By the way, I think I'm out on the grilled cheese.
I haven't had grilled cheese in like
I think it's overrated.
Years.
I honestly, I haven't had a grilled cheese in probably like a decade.
Grilled cheese is having a moment, and I think it's a bit much.
It's having a moment now?
I feel like...
Really?
I feel like I haven't had grilled cheese in so long, though. I should probably try it to see how it is. But it's bread and cheese.
Yeah, on a certain level, it's sort of like a poor, stepchild of pizza. Pizza's got tomato sauce and toppings.
It's just without the tomato.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know.
I mean, it sounds more
certainly not the healthiest thing as we know these days to have like just a bunch of carbs and cheese.
But I think it would work as drunk food for sure.
Oh, I mean,
a lot of things.
That's a different question than like.
It's a much different question for sure. I might have to whip up some grilled cheeses for us later.
I mean, I'm not opposed to that. I'm out on them, but I will nevertheless eat them.
I mean, I think if you had because when I think grilled cheese, I think kind of just like. The stereotypical like fake yellow cheese, right? Mm-hmm. And I feel like if you use really good cheese, it could probably be pretty good.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So maybe, and you could probably add other things. Like you could probably add like sautéed onions and stuff, and
caramelized. So I have another controversial opinion on this subject. I think the bacon, egg, and cheese, which I will absolutely support.
Yeah.
I think it's better without the cheese. I think the cheese diminishes.
Well,
I don't think it matters.
You're talking about
diminishes the flavor.
But you're talking about going to like a deli,
and because they usually give very, very greasy. Like the cheddar cheese is just spilling everywhere.
It's like, crap cheese. It's like
your hands the whole day. No,
it's like
cheese.
It's like 37% cheese and like 40% yellow, and I don't know where the rest of the percent went.
The bacon and the egg and the whole wheat bagel that's all you need. A little bit of pepper. That's all you need. Everything else is extra.
Pepper is underrated on those kinds of sandwiches.
I haven't had an egg sandwich on a bagel in years.
But you live in New York.
Here's the thing: I've had two really bad experiences. Okay. One was
Jesus Christ.
One was like
Let's talk through this.
Yeah, Luke, we're here for you.
Well, like if you have like grape vodka when you're 18 and then you throw up everywhere. You never want grape vodka the whole rest of your life.
I thought you said grape. You said grape vodka.
Grape vodka. Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Like the smell of that would just trigger you to
yeah.
So I had like an egg sandwich, and it kind of had a weird smell going in.
Yeah, that should have been your first indication.
But I didn't do anything about it. I just ate it.
Yeah.
I go to school. I had a lesson that day, so it's like I'm playing trumpet in a one-on-one lesson, and I'm just like,
Oh, yeah.
And it was like one of those, like, I could throw up, I could fart, it could be accompanied by poop. I don't know.
We got from Mahler to fart in a hurry, I have to say.
No, this is how fast this turns, though. Like, this is... Okay. Yeah, this is what happens.
I like that there's a second story. That's one of two.
Yeah. So would you wind up...
I made it through the lesson, and then, it wasn't pretty after that, but,
Right. We survived.
Yeah, but for some reason it just left a memory.
Wasn't pretty.
On to the sequel.
The next
how
time,
was episode 2?
The next time I worked up the courage to go get a breakfast sandwich at a bagel place. You guys might know what I'm talking about. I won't say the name of the place, but there's a bagel place somewhat close to Stony Brook University that you could argue might be a front for some kind of mafia kind of vibe.
That could be any bagel place anywhere.
I accidentally stole 2 breakfast sandwiches from them, so I'm scared to go back.
Okay.
That's the
bad experience?
Whom did you steal the breakfast sandwiches from?
Wait, did you just forget to pay?
Yeah. And then I was with my girlfriend at the time, and the lady asked me as I went to get the sandwiches, like, "Oh, did you pay?" I was like, "Yeah."
Wait, I should try this. This is great to know.
Not on purpose. I thought she paid for them, right? And then, whatever, she was like, "Oh, how much did it come to? Like, I'll give you, half of the price." I was
I didn't pay for them.
I didn't pay for them. And she's like, "Well, I didn't pay for them." I'm like, "Uh-oh."
Run.
And then, there was that, 10 seconds where I had the chance to be like, actually...
Wait, let me ask you this, though. How was the sandwich?
It was good.
Yeah, because you tasted guilt.
Is this why you broke up?
No, it was not. It was not.
It doesn't help. Here's a trick, though, that I've been doing for years now, which... People always say butter or cream cheese. Wrong question. I make my own garlic toast bagels.
Okay.
Oh, I know that. Trick.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
You take the bagel, slice it in half.
Yeah.
Dip it in olive oil.
Okay.
Toast that up a little bit. Add garlic, oregano, salt, pepper.
Wow.
This is giving me flashbacks to our drunk tank where we just talked about how to make popcorn for like 30 minutes.
Hey, it happens. We may get there, but it's better for you than butter or cream cheese.
Sure,
it's delicious.
Sure,
and yeah, it's what more do you? I mean, it's a little more prep time, but you gotta
be careful with the garlic as your morning meal, though.
No, I'm all in on garlic. I'm all in.
I garlic hard, and so garlic. There's a few things that you can do with garlic to mitigate being too garlicky. When you roast it. I always put I toast. I don't over roast it because I feel like that makes it a little like more.
I like a little burnt edge to the garlic.
You don't want it over roasted, and you don't want it under roasted.
Yeah.
So I put it like halfway through the toasting process, and then I cover it with the oregano and the other spices so it doesn't get too burnt. And that's like a good medium where like you don't wind up too garlic. The garlic isn't an issue at that point. Just pop a Tic Tac, you're good.
I see.
Yeah, always have a Tic Tac.
Shit in a mint, you're good to go.
Yeah.
As what's his name from the league says, Rafi.
Is that his
thing? Is like when he's drunk at a party,
or something? Yeah.
He's like getting wasted, but he was supposed to be the DD, designated driver.
Yeah.
And they're like, Rafi, what the hell are you doing? You're supposed to be like sober. You're driving us around. He goes, I'll be fine. He goes, let me know about 20 minutes before you want to leave. I'll pop into the bathroom, take a shit, pop in a mint, good to go.
Yeah.
And they're like, that's not how that works. He goes, oh no. The guy says,
shit in a mint.
And does that work? He goes, sort of. As if like, yeah, it sort of works. I stopped drinking for 20 minutes. I did poop, which did something. And I popped in a mint. That did something. It sort of works. You could say it sort of works.
These are all sentences.
Yeah, I said words.
Yeah.
Like
So you had the TED Talk and the Beethoven Violin Concerto all ready to go.
Yeah.
But the scene from the league didn't bother to pull that one out.
Yeah.
Well, we need that. We need our assistant. Donate on Patreon. We'll pay for an assistant to be here with YouTube, just like queuing everything up.
I gotta say, I'm a little disappointed in our fans because we still have nobody who's subscribed to the $100 an episode subscription.
I know.
And you get bonuses for that, believe you me.
What was the bonus?
We made some promises last episode that I'm not proud of.
Even the $5 one, I'll sing a poem. Not sing.
He said it. So
I'll say a poem to you in Turkish.
He'll say a poem for you in Turkish. A love poem to you in Turkish.
But not the $2 one.
He'll lick his lips while he does it, too.
Speaking of Mahler. There are moments of Mahler's music that maybe I haven't heard. Whatever. My point is, like, when I hear music of Mahler, almost immediately I go, aha, that's Mahler.
Right.
More than, say, Mozart, right?
Okay.
Although I could very easily pick out Mozart, I might confuse it with Haydn.
Right.
That's
or
interesting.
any number of other composers from that time period. And that's kind of true, like Beethoven and Brahms, you might confuse, depending, I mean, there's some obvious ones. So that made me think of, like, voice in music, like composers develop a voice. Like, how do you think about, like, voice in writing?
Well, I mean, so you brought up Saunders earlier. I mean, nobody is ever confused that they're reading a George Saunders story, just because his actual syntax is so different. It's choppy, and it's deliberately choppy and circuitous and even a little ugly, so as to capture the cadences that I guess that he feels like he heard when he was growing up in the Midwest, and that he's heard in upstate New York when he's been at Syracuse for all these years. For me, the number one example of this that I admire the most is Dennis Johnson. You read his short stories and you're like, there is no voice as lyric and penetrating as that voice. That's the best example of it. And then there are other writers like Chekhov, whom I mentioned earlier. And I've read Chekhov in a lot of different translations, though never in the Russian, because I don't know how to do that. But it's plain.
Oh, the second half of this podcast is in Russian.
I'm going to be in a lot of trouble. But it's a plain style. I mean, it isn't really voice-driven at all. I mean, it's insightful and it's moving, but it's not about the style. It's not about the arrangement of words in the way that it is for so many other writers. And for music, I feel that way about Schubert. Every time I hear a Schubert impromptu or a sonata, I'm like, yep, that's Schubert.
Have you ever heard his, like, Winterreise or, like, the song cycles?
Yeah, but you know what? I know that Schubert's so famous for what's the word in German? The Lieder? Is that right?
Yeah.
I don't like, and I know this puts me somewhat in the minority, I don't like his music paired with a voice as much as I know a lot of people do. I know that, who's that guy, Ian Bostrom or whatever is.
Bostridge?
Yeah, Bostridge, right.
Who, by the way, was a philosopher before
super interesting
he
guy.
became a
Yeah,
singer,
super interesting guy. Yeah. For me, the music is more affecting when it's not paired with voice. And one of the things that I like about Schubert so much is he has all those sonatas and impromptus that are like short stories. They're not symphonies. They're not novelistic. You know, they take 5 minutes and they feel like
they're so self-contained.
Yeah, they feel like a moment. And I, you know, obviously any number of other, you know, composers did stuff like that. Obviously Beethoven has a million sonatas. But I like Schubert's better. I find they speak to me more than other composers. I think maybe because his symphonies aren't as accomplished as some of the other composers.
Yeah. He had like a voice for things not necessary. I mean, his, like, you know, if you ask me what's my favorite symphonic composer, first name is Mahler that pops in my head. Next, probably Brahms.
Okay.
There's just something so Brahmsian about it.
Yeah.
Brahmsy about
Brahms-esque.
it. Even Joe, like, I've gotten you pretty into Mahler, right?
Oh, yeah.
But you definitely have not heard all Mahler.
No,
and
not nearly enough, yeah.
Even to an untrained musical ear, I think they could pick out Mahler.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's very it's distinct in its, like, almost epicness.
Yeah, it's big, right? It's big music.
Oh, it's
sure.
It's huge. Like, it really, like, you feel it blooming as you listen to it. It's really
one thing.
Something else.
So I was watching a trumpet interview the other day with this guy Chris Martin, actually, and he was at the archives of the New York Phil, and Leonard Bernstein was the conductor there for quite a while, and so his score of Mahler 5, which is a very famous trumpet, it opens with a trumpet solo. It's a funeral march.
Is that the one with the insane ending? Or is that 2?
Is that supposed to narrow down Mahler symphonies?
Touche.
2 is the epic ending that we always watch drunk at night.
Oh, yeah, and we like trip on it.
Yeah.
Basically, yeah.
So this is what Bernstein wrote on the cover of this score for Mahler 5. He said, like rocking a corpse to sleep.
Yeah.
And I was like, fuck.
Damn.
Yeah.
Like, and
that's some poetry, dude.
I think you hear this from a lot of conductors that like really try their game at interpreting Mahler, that like it disturbs them. You know, it's like you got to dive into a dark place. It would be like if you were going into the Saunders world too heavily. You know.
You know, and I would say
that's cool.
I think there are a lot of writers who can't bring themselves to that place, and I get it. And there are any number of writers I can think of who would be better if they could.
Yeah,
sure.
But that's a lot to ask of someone. I mean, to you know, really give yourself over to that could definitely, without risking hyperbole, ruin your life.
Sure.
You know, if you were really to commit yourself to something. So I get why certain writers don't. But you know, the flip side of that is, I can think of any number of writers, particularly in the short story, who are masterful technicians, but they just kind of skate along the surface, and you don't really get too deep.
They don't scratch deep enough that make that sound that I was talking about before, where you go.
It's still
like,
pleasant.
Yeah.
It's still enjoyable,
Sure.
but it's easily forgettable.
Would you say that's the difference then between somebody who you look at or you read and you say, well, that's a great author, and somebody else who you're just like, yeah, that kind of tickles my, you know.
Well, for me, if
tickles my pickle.
If the sentence level writing is good,
yeah,
I'll stick around forever. I'll actually wait on writers.
That's what will carry you through, right?
Yeah, I'll wait on writers. I'll read
sure.
a writer whose sentence level writing, to my mind, is extraordinary, and I'll say, well, I'm just going to read all your books until you die or give up because your sentences are that good.
Yeah.
Like technically, you mean? even if they're not.
Or just like that happened to me with
just interesting.
That happened to me with like Tom Robbins, where I was just like, I've never read a boring Tom Robbins sentence. Well, it just doesn't happen.
I mean, it happens in genre fiction sometimes. I mean, like someone like Raymond Chandler, he's not deep on anything. Raymond Chandler is not trying to dive into the depths of anybody's soul, but the sentences are clean and interesting and surprising, and it transcends pure entertainment. Not that there's anything so bad about that. There is a little bit more kick to it, but there's no real depth to it. And so I would say the sentence level writing for me, I will stick around for a long time.
Sure.
Yeah. But then the writer who actually moves me and stays with me, that's a sort of alchemy that's hard to put your finger on. It doesn't happen on the sentence level. It happens in this sort of slow accumulation of things, and it would be a very difficult thing to say how. You could map it out, and I've tried to map it out in different classes and say, well, first he does this, and then he does that, and then he does that.
But it's like the sum doesn't account.
No, not at all.
It's not a perfect science at all.
It just, and I think that for that reason, you oftentimes have to read novels, I think, within a week or two to really get lost in them.
That's why I was saying before that it can be tricky when I'm busy. Like the short story is perfect for me.
Yeah. A story ideally in one sitting. That's what Poe said. You read a story in one sitting.
Totally.
Yeah. And that's why I actually like teaching short story over novel, especially because, I mean, on a realistic, practical level, it's like, I remember back to undergrad.
Of course.
I had so much going on.
A lot of demands on their time.
It's like to have somebody put in the concentration that you need, like you say, over the course of like a week and a half, 2 weeks, like realistically, I mean, some of them will take advantage of it and they'll get a lot out of it, but when you look over the span of a whole class, it's kind of like, it doesn't always happen.
I mean, think about that. You're taking 5 or 6 classes, and probably each of your instructors think that they're the most important person in your life.
Yeah. Well, as they should. That's what they get paid for.
And then maybe you're trying to pick up a girl, and then you're living on your own for the first time in your life. I mean, there's a lot going on.
Figuring out how to do laundry.
Maybe
where do you get quarters?
Maybe you're working too. I mean, there's a lot going on.
Like, oh shit, I forgot to shower this morning. Like.
Yeah, I still have pajamas on.
Yeah, I mean, half the kids I see around campus that are like undergrads. First off, the one thing I noticed as I got to my later 20s is like college kids look like kids.
Oh, big time. Yeah, for sure.
It's just kind of confusing because like I teach a few kids that are in college, and I've had a few older high school students that are auditioning for college and things like that. And I always used to think back to when I was in middle school and you would see the high school kids and they look like giant monkeys,
Right.
And then like it's just the perspective is so. Yeah. I see 18 as like. I mean, I think back to myself when I was 18. I'm like, Jesus, I was a fucking idiot.
Yeah, I didn't even know I was alive, basically.
Yeah, I think back like 3 years. I'm like, whoa, 3 years ago, Luke was a fucking idiot.
And what's funny too is I noticed because I have a lot of freshmen in my writing classes, and from like the start of fall semester to the end of it, they're like weathered by the end. Like they get older. You see them actually because
like Obama's hair turning gray.
Exactly. Yeah. They have their hair, their proverbial hairs turned gray just because like they have to do all this real life stuff.
They're experiencing so much so fast. I mean, that's how it was for me too. I remember being in college and feeling like I was so much more worldly when I was 19 than when I was 18, and I wasn't, but I certainly felt that way because I was exposed to all.
Well,
these
maybe
things.
Comparatively, right?
That's one of the tricky things that you have to you feel like when you start to get more knowledge and worldliness, it can easily take over your ego a little bit too.
Oh, totally.
And that's one of the things that like going through your mid-20s, I think, fixes if you do it in a good way. Well, like you curb that with like. What I learned from most of my education, I learned how much I don't know,
Yeah.
Like, like I learned that you could devote your whole life to music history. I learned you could devote your whole life to studying
that's a thing
harmony,
that you can do, right? And it's like, I didn't realize that. Like,
so
I didn't realize
you
that
scratch the surface
as
of these
people
things,
actually doing it,
and then you got to decide where am I going to go all in on,
Yeah.
I just want to point out for the listeners at home that this podcast studio is an exercise in arrested development of somebody who decided not to move forward with his life. I would describe to you what I'm looking at right now.
I wouldn't know anything about that. We should plug in the backlight.
Oh yeah. So Joe has a map of what do you call the Game of Thrones?
It's called Westeros.
Westeros.
Dude.
Yeah. I'm not the biggest Game of Thrones fan.
Clearly not. But I also have a forest.
We've got the Lego Star Wars.
He's got multiple Lego things.
Yeah. I also have a robot.
Beer, mirrors.
A bow.
We've got like there's a lot of stuff going on here.
Pig calendar.
So Joe, what are you doing
calendar.
with your life, huh?
Look around you. I mean,
we've got Pumpkin Man. You've seen that in a few of our posts.
Yeah. What do you want?
He holds our beer sometimes.
Yeah.
That's hilarious.
Yeah, the Grateful Dead poster. No, we're kicking it.
You know, there's a Mahler quote where he says, "If I could say what I had to say in words, I wouldn't bother trying to say it in music."
Woody,
I hate.
Come on, he's that good, and he's just gonna be like, "Yeah, nailed it."
Come on, Gustav.
Yeah, come on, dude.
I mean, that's kind of funny because he wrote the text for a lot of his song cycles.
Did he really?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, bullshit. Like I said,
you used the word lyric before.
Yeah.
And I've heard the word lyrical used for poetry, especially. Right. Now, it's a word that gets used in the music world all the time. Every audition you take, it says, please prepare 2 technical pieces and 2 lyrical pieces.
Right.
That's
so
funny.
a technical piece, and you think to technique with words. And a technical piece in music is something that shows off, your skill set. Can you move around the instrument from high to low? Do you have an even sound? You know, can you tongue fast? Can you
tongue fast?
Well, on trumpet,
Okay.
If it's a violin, it's
I'm not
going.
judging. I'm just asking.
Or quickly.
Quickly?
Yeah, quickly might be better. Yeah. It's more sustainable.
When I was in undergrad, I was lucky enough to have a lot of older these guys were.
Wow,
there,
where is this one going?
I don't know. I'm sitting back with my beer. Okay. Yeah. How did the older men treat you?
All right, I'm going to abandon that story.
Fair enough.
So in an audition, you have technical things and then lyrical things, and lyrical things are usually flowing.
Yeah.
Singing. In music, you always see this phrase "cantabile" written in the music. It means in a singing style. Right. And it's just funny that this word lyrical came from words first and then got adopted.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, when it comes to writing, prose is in certain contexts, many contexts, synonymous with quick sidebar. Joe has a Game Boy, which I just discovered.
Oh, that's an original Game Boy.
Original Game Boy,
yeah.
But anyhow, prose is synonymous with something that's slow and plodding and not particularly interesting. And in many contexts, lyric has connotations of something that's poetic and beautiful and sort of light and moving. So when you study writing and you talk about writing, writers are forever talking about their craft. You would think it was a bunch of metal workers or something. And I think that happened organically over time so as to emphasize that the writers were putting in the work, that this wasn't just this sort of ethereal thing that happened.
It's not something you're born with.
Somebody
was
struck by a moment and sat down and dashed off something. That writers really wanted to emphasize that they were putting.
Well, there is a craft to it.
Yeah, that they were putting time and hard work into things. If you talk to any writing instructor, that person will probably tell you the number one thing you have to do is read a lot, and the number 2 thing you have to do is spend a lot of time every day working at it.
Yeah, I would even characterize it as failing at it, right?
Yeah,
figuring out what doesn't work.
So there's this weird tension forever in writing workshops between thinking about it like metallurgy and thinking about it like something beautiful you're creating.
Sure.
And writers are just very comfortable having both of those things in the same room.
Yeah. I think it's the same with musicians, right? You play, for us, it's not a writing workshop, it's a master class, right?
Yeah.
And you play a piece, and, there's a number of approaches they could coach you on, right? They could say, what concept are you thinking of? What character is the music? They could say, if you're playing Mahler 5, right? they could say, "Are you rocking that corpse to sleep?" Right? Or they could say, "I encourage you to breathe like this. Keep the tongue forward. Keep the mouth very," and try to help you craft the sound to be even and in tune. Careful about being sharp on that note. Pull out the trigger for this note. Yet at the same time, you're playing fucking Mahler, right?
Yeah.
So it's like you cannot be expressive in music without technique.
Right. But I think that's exactly true of writing.
Yeah, yeah.
It's funny, too, that you say that, because I actually just had some conferences with students today, and one of the creative works I did this semester was actually called Lyrical Essay. And it basically, I mean, there's so many different examples of what that means and how that actually translates to, like, different types of works. I mean, it's a pretty broad category, but for those students, my point was to basically, like, break free of those genre conventions, sort of.
Yeah.
And just, like, think about, like, well, you know, you don't have to have a 5-sentence paragraph in even a fictional story. You can have a 1-word paragraph or a 1-sentence paragraph, or, you know, whatever. If you really ask, like, well, what is it that you want to emphasize in terms of that tone or that mood, or, you know, whatever idea or feeling that you're trying to get to. And it's actually really cool, because when you explain it to them that way and you see how they choose to break, because they, especially more technically minded students, like a lot of our students, they're more, you know, science minded, but to see them, like, think about that. And my point that I emphasize to them is that, well, I can't tell you where to do that. Yeah. You have to decide, well, what is that point that you want to emphasize, and how you choose to break that down. You may choose to elaborate different ideas or different sentences, different, you know, points throughout the story, but it really gets them thinking outside of that box. So to me, like, it's been like an interesting, because it's the first semester I really taught it, and it's been like a really interesting exercise for that reason, to really have them, you know, try to assess, like, well, what are the just different effects of doing that in different ways? Because it's like, there isn't just like one right way to do it, right? Yeah. And it's like, that doesn't mean that there's not a craft to it still, because you can see the effect by breaking it down in these different ways. So I think there's something really to be said for that, in terms of, like, what effect that actually elicits.
And the truth is, you can fail, and any number of people do, in either direction, right? I mean, you can be the student, and we've all had these students who says, I don't need structure. What I'm doing transcends structure. This is just pure feeling, right? That student's going to go down in flames.
Porridge.
Yeah.
It's like oatmeal.
Yeah. But then there's the student, and this happens less frequently, but it does happen, particularly at the graduate level. The student who is technically proficient, is masterful on the sentence, even the paragraph level, but there's no heartbeat. And you read the prose, and there's no life to it. And I was that I was that student at grad school for a time.
Which is almost worse to me sometimes.
It's almost worse. I was so sensitive to what the writers I admired were doing that I was essentially just trying to mimic them. And it took an instructor to sort of pull me aside and say, this isn't you. I mean, this is just mimicry, you know?
I mean, mimicry, like, we use that in music all the time. It can be helpful, right? You hear somebody's sound and you try to mimic that.
Sure.
But only if it's serving the larger goal of, I'm using this as a pathway to find my own voice.
Right, yeah.
Sure. But that's a hard thing to teach somebody.
Well, you almost can't teach it.
Yeah.
There's a book that you use in the trumpet pedagogy. It's the Arbin book. He was a famous French trumpet player and teacher. And at the end of the book, there are a bunch of these sort of etudes. But they're not. I mean, etude almost makes it sound dry, like it's a study, right?
Yeah.
But they're very musical. And he says, we've reached the point in this book where the word won't carry any more weight, where I can't really tell you what it is you need to find. You must find it yourself. You know. I think, you know, everything you guys are saying about the balance between technical and lyrical, between feeling and structure, right?
Yeah.
It's like a duality. It's like a yin-yang type thing. You see these players in music all the time that are just technically perfect.
Yeah.
Right? You're almost pissed off when you go hear them play. You're like, fuck you, how are you this good at your instrument?
Yeah.
And how are you not using it for good? You know,
right? Using your power. It's funny, actually. My grading rubric, the way it breaks down is that I have 4 categories. It's like it's basically like clarity of content, grammar and punctuation, form and style, and then overall effectiveness. So The two on the outside are more like content, and the two in the middle are more technical.
Right.
And the two in the middle, the grammar and punctuation and the form and style, I actually like weight less than the others in terms of content and effectiveness, because you read enough essays and you realize that, well, as a reader, what am I really interested in? And I'm much more interested in the originality and the freshness of and the thoroughness of thought than I am if you have a few grammar or punctuation errors. Like that takes me out of it much.
You know what that
less.
makes me think of? I remember reading something from the Vienna Philharmonic that it said something to the effect of they were suspicious of any audition that was perfect.
That checks out.
It's like, how safe were you playing it? How much were you trying to win the audition and not be an artist? You know,
right? Yeah, and it's like that's what makes it interesting, right? That's what makes it unique. Like,
also, it's all about expressing humanity, and humans are far from perfect, obviously, right?
Well, if you mimic something exactly, that's an accomplishment, but is that unique? Is that interesting?
Yeah, I mean, it could be something you do on your own time, right? Like, if you could somehow capture the same type of voice as a Vonnegut, right? You know, then
I'll take it. Yeah,
good luck with that.
But I'm saying,
accept
like,
that
you would
genie
learn
power.
something about writing, right? If I could sound like Chris Martin on trumpet, I've fucking figured something out about the technique of how trumpet works.
Right?
Yeah.
But do I want to play the Haydn trumpet concerto exactly with every move he does?
Right.
Or do I want to kind of interpret it myself with the new skills I've acquired, you know?
Right, yeah.
So I've had one thought and one question. First, the etudes made me think of Chopin, and I just want to put in a plug for a writer who never found the audience that he deserved. Stuart Dybek wrote an amazing story called Chopin in Winter, where the protagonist of the story is hanging out with his old Polish grandfather, and his grandfather's teaching him about Chopin based on playing him or making him listen to various pieces of music. And Stuart Dybek's first two collections of stories, Coast to Chicago, is probably actually the one that I would recommend. Really excellent stuff. Never really totally found an audience, but great writer.
Sometimes those are the best, right?
Yeah, of course. A writer's writer, as they say.
Yeah.
And then a question, someone who's often described as, being really mathematical, somebody like Bach, say, when you listen to his, let's say, Goldberg Variations or Well-Tempered Clavier, do those sound to you like exercises, or do those sound to you like emotional experiences you can engage with? Both. Okay.
So I would say Bach in the scheme of music, right? Like, as people were discovering chromaticism and that you could be in all these different keys and change keys and imagine just playing in every key at once. It's just insanity, right?
Yeah.
Bach found this sort of amazing middle ground of I'm going places. Like, I would say the middle ground is just structure and expressivity. Like, for a musician to be totally expressive, like just 100% expressive, would just be like going on stage and screaming,
Right.
Just like, and you have no bow technique if you're a violinist. You have no embouchure if you're a trumpet player. So there's always that balance. And I think when I listen to Bach, I guess I could answer your question by saying when I was younger, Bach sounded more like an etude, more like a dry study. Very much like a meal that gets your nutrition in but doesn't make you...
Green vegetables.
Yeah.
Right.
They get the job done.
Sort of like unseasoned green vegetables, right?
Don't put them in a grilled cheese. You won't be happy.
Whereas what I've been focusing my time on lately is Baroque music and studying Baroque trumpet, which by definition means I'm playing mostly Bach. And I'm studying like...
He has those horn concertos and stuff, right?
Well, I mean, his B minor mass is probably my favorite piece of music right now. The trumpet parts in that are close to impossible, but they're just amazing. I should rephrase that. The first trumpet part is close to impossible. The other two are very reasonable. Hard, but reasonable. When you listen to his cantatas, though, and this is what I've been doing, is reading up on, what was life like in Leipzig in, 1730.
Yeah. What's the context? What's the
when they
culture?
use the word God, what does that mean to somebody who lost 4 of their 6 children? You know,
Yeah,
what does that mean to somebody who doesn't
Don't worry,
know?
he had 30 more or whatever.
Yeah.
Well, that's what they thought, you know? Like,
Well,
that was part of
a
the
big
vibe.
part of it.
Yeah.
It's like, of course you keep having kids. Oh, look, the wife died. I get remarried in 6 months. You know,
Right.
like, you know, that was just like how things rolled, I guess.
Thank God I'm going to die and go play bocce with Jesus in heaven.
Well, so that's the thing.
I'm sorry,
it's like
cricket.
I try to think like, you know, what is someone like Bach's like idea of God, right?
Yeah.
And so like these cantatas he wrote, of course, sometimes they had a bigger time scale, but it's like every Sunday at church was a new Bach cantata, you know? And it's like...
That's like a new Netflix episode every week.
That's tough to do. And you don't have like the summer to like... I mean, of course, like I said, you can borrow things, you can whatever.
Yeah.
But there was this sense of like, it's all or nothing, you know?
Yeah.
And for the people that are coming to church, it's not like, oh, like... So I was reading the one about the last prophet of...
Waiakanda.
Wakanda from
Yeah.
their short story
I
collection.
think that was my favorite one too.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that one.
Yeah, like so, you know, just I'm always fascinated by the topic of religion, and I think Bach was part of my. I was like just like a very aggressively active atheist. I think in my lower 20s.
Yeah, you were
and
a real
then
dick.
AKA Dick. Yeah.
It was so annoying.
Yeah.
Like even with the skeptic thing, right? Like
Yeah.
if somebody was
Yeah,
like,
sure.
"Oh, the weirdest thing happened to me," I was like, "It wasn't weird, very explainable."
So
You know?
you're saying that you don't believe in ghosts? It's like, wait, what?
Yeah. But like listening to Bach and just like kind of trying to like, you know, imagine being a person in like Leipzig and it's like, you know, how much knowledge do we know? I mean, I know there's so much mystery in the universe, but we know about the Big Bang, right? We know that, you know, we have satellites, we have cell phones, there's just so much to know.
Well, we have these concepts that like we also extrapolate, like they're tied into these like real life things that we have, like satellites, for example. It's like, oh, the same people who claim the Big Bang also build satellites.
Sure.
Well, we know satellites work, so...
And like Einstein's equations are what make GPS work, right? The slightly...
Well, that's just fake news,
the distance from Earth's center of gravity, right, is a calculable thing that actually changes
do you know the
clock.
calculation? Could you tell me the calculation?
I can tell you roughly. So
yeah? Okay, go.
Let's say a satellite's traveling at like 20,000 miles per hour around the Earth in orbit.
You're assuming that the world is round, but go on.
That speed is slowing down the clocks on board the satellite. But it's also farther from Earth's center of gravity, so that's actually speeding up the time slightly.
Are they analog clocks or digital clocks?
It doesn't quite balance, but if you don't plug in the equation for Einstein to like alter how the time changes, you're off by 10 miles within 1 day on GPS systems.
It's that much?
Yeah.
Really? Wow.
So it's like, you know, science has been robust enough to give most of us a sense of like, I don't have to think about God, right? So I just think at the time in Leipzig,
I got an app for that.
You kind of had to think about God and what the fuck that meant for you personally.
Well, you might as well. You don't have GPS. What else are you going to do? There's no Netflix. It's fucking Leipzig and 17
Leipzig,
whatever.
how do I get to church? Go forward and make a left, and then you're at church.
Oh, good thing I prayed to God and you told me. Like, that worked out.
So I would say when I listen to Bach, I get a sense of a personal God.
Sure,
you know?
sure. Yeah, sure.
Right.
No, I think you're right. I think I agree with you. I know there are people who've said that don't really think of him as a believer, think of the whole thing as sort of mercenary, and you know he was doing what he had to do to support his 10,000 kids and so forth. But,
right. As would I.
Yeah, no, I get a real awe for a higher power in his work.
Yeah, and a complex version of that.
Yeah,
not like a daddy in the sky who grants you like a really delicious breakfast in the morning.
But isn't that so much deeper though? We talked about that. We talked about that in the last episode. How like. Yeah, the concept of God, like, that's very different between even devout believers, right? Because you can can meet one person who says, like, oh, yeah, God, like, and then it's like, well, what does that actually mean?
That's something I've learned, is to always ask people, what do you mean when you say the word God?
He's in the sky, and, like, we're going to die and, like, you know, go, like, play tennis with Billy Joel and Jesus. And
can't let that go, man.
It's going to be great.
Yeah.
Can't let it go.
Can't let the Billy Joel
Well, you know,
go.
it's been established. Billy Joel, if you're listening... Please sign up for $100 episode.
Billy Joel, give us $100. Come on.
The great book reviewer,
or a bottle of vodka at least.
Book reviewer for the New Yorker, James Wood, wrote a really interesting essay a few years back where he talked about how when he was growing up in England, he played the drums and how meaningful the drums were for him and how he revered Keith Moon. And it's really nice about Keith Moon. But he talks about, and when he talks about Keith Moon, he says that the really sort of revolutionary thing he did was that he would sort of play in these moments where nobody had been playing drums before. And so he would sort of fill in these spaces where you were supposed to pause, and he would just roll right through them, and that kind of changed the way that people thought about listening to rock and roll in the 60s. But he talks about Bach a lot, too, because he grew up with this classical education. He gets around to Glenn Gould's interpretations of the Goldberg variations and how different, famously, the one that was recorded in the 50s or 60s is from the one that was recorded in the early 80s. And he said, and his conclusion, and for the listeners at home who haven't heard them, pulled up on Spotify, you can listen to them both. But the first one's it's bravado, it's fast, it's confident, it's energetic, and the second one is much slower and more meditative. And James Wood says that when he wrote the essay, that he still sort of reveres that younger Goldberg variation. He wants to be the person who thinks about the world that way.
Sure.
In his current place, he is much more the second Glenn Gould, and feels like that is the world as he understands it.
I mean, both things have to exist almost, right?
Sure. I mean, that's what growing up is, right?
Yeah.
One builds upon the other.
The world needs 20-years-olds, but it also needs 50-year-olds to tell the 20-year-olds to stop fucking around and go to sleep.
20-year-olds to rage.
Exactly.
It's symbiotic.
Yeah.
For me, like what I'm studying with Bach is like getting into the text, and what I found so far is the deeper you get, you never find a roadblock where you're like, oh, that's just a thing for being a thing. It's like, oh, he's commenting on the theology of the cross versus the theology of,
Right, yeah, that's pretty cool.
And you're seeing all these, like, and then it ties into the musical form. You're like, oh, this duality is, like, tying into, like, this cantata, which is in 7 parts. You have the first 7 movements, then you would have the sermon of the Mass, and then the last 7 movements.
Right.
And look, that chorale comes back at the end, but now he's using this stanza of text. And it just, like, makes you think, like, one, I wish I lived back then in the sense of, like, you just had all the time in the world to do your craft.
Minus dying on a farm of smallpox, but go on.
Yeah, and minus not being able to work at night because there was no light. But
yeah. Well, you went to bed and you woke up and fucking,
you could buy a candle.
Yeah, they have candles.
You're playing your shitty harpsichord.
Trump is going to give us candles
candlelight
again.
or whatever.
Yeah, who knows how, like, out of tune those
Trump is going to make
were.
candles great again.
I mean, that's a cool thing in the period instrument world now, which is like, it's like a debate. It's like, well, do you play? I always make this joke, right? We're playing on it's called historically informed performances, right? So you tune to the tuning systems they used back then. You use the instruments.
Oh, that's cool.
String players use gut strings, right? They use different bows and different bowing technique. People read the treatises of, like, the teachers from back then and try to copy,
cool.
all these kind of things. But then I remember being at a concert and they were tuning the organ with an iPhone. And I was just like, well, that's not period performance,
That's like the Amish charging their cell phones in their cars. And it's what are you really getting around here?
Listening to an organ in a church can be really moving, but also pianos are just fucking way better than some of the stuff they were playing.
So are modern violins. And
it's
so
like that's why they switched to that.
Although, let me submit this. In the trumpet world, if you play Bach on modern trumpet, you're going to use a piccolo trumpet. It's a small trumpet, so that the extreme high register that you're playing Bach in, it's very secure. But what you get when modern people play Bach is a very technically accurate version of Bach. So you would get like let's say in the case of B minor Mass, every note is like a block of sound that's perfectly even. Right. On Baroque trumpet, there's no way to play and be that accurate. What you actually have to do is you map on the text. And so in that case, the text is like just the word Gloria, right? And only the G has like a harsh beginning. The other parts are and you play more lyrically on a Baroque trumpet. Not to say you can't do that on a modern trumpet, but it's so much easier to get away with the more technical version. Whereas on a Baroque trumpet, the only way to possibly be accurate is to play lyrically. It's almost like a cool, like the ticket into even making it work is lyricism.
I got good news and bad news.
What's that?
I know what the bad news is.
They're both the same. We're down to this is the last beer.
That's perfect.
Yeah.
Timing works out perfect. How is that bad news at all?
Well, because we're out of beer.
So we're drinking.
How is it good news at all?
Because we're out of beer, and we should probably stop drinking.
So we're pouring. We started with the Sand City. You want to catch people up on the beer we drank?
Okay,
Joe?
yeah, because I actually
circled back to the Sand City.
Walk through this, yeah.
All right, so we started with the Sand City. We went on to I think the Night Shift Brewing Morph Indian Pale Ale. Pretty good. I enjoyed it. Pretty good brewery in general, I think. Then we moved on to the Burrial, which is one of my favorite.
Yeah, you're a believer in them.
Yeah. So this was the Scythe Rye. It's an IPA. To me, it tastes more like an American pale ale because it's got that rye-ness to it. They do some really good beers. I can recommend some for you for sure.
I've had some amazing Burrial beer.
They do that Blades one. That's really
the
good.
Gang of Blades is really. I think that's the best one. But they also do. I forget the name of it, but they do a coffee stout that will just knock you on your butt after one. It's like
many a coffee stout.
Yeah, it's like 12% or something ridiculous. But
it's from Ashville, North Carolina, which is a city that has a really great beer scene.
Yeah, I really want to
go there and Airbnb for a
there,
few nights and hit a different brewery every day.
Yeah, and then we had
the other ones. We had Barrier Money.
Barrier Money, yeah.
And then this one I had actually never heard of. Joe, where did you get this?
This was yours.
This is the visitors' contribution. That's Mikkeller. So interesting thing about Mikkeller. So they're out of San Diego, but Evil Twin in Brooklyn. The other twin is Mikkeller.
Wait, is he the evil one?
That's not for me to say.
Oh man!
But what do you suspect?
But there are two. One is Evil Twin.
Right.
There was a falling out, famously.
Oh,
and the
really?
other is Mikkeller.
Like a real falling out, or like a?
Oh.
It's again not
was it
for me to
I want to
say
use this malt
whether
for the beer.
it
Fuck
was
you.
staged for
or
the
you
sake
banged
of
my wife.
Or if
craft
it
beer
you banged
world.
my wife.
But Mikkeller, even though
who knows,
even though they're in San Diego, I have not yet been. But in the beneath Citi Field, where the Mets play, there is this huge new brewery.
Wait, really?
Yes.
Interesting.
And it's Mikkeller.
Really?
And it's supposed to revolutionize craft beer drinking in Major League Baseball.
I mean, I've been to a few parks, and the craft brewing at them is not on point. So.
I am planning on making a pilgrimage to Citi Field and checking this out for myself. But yes.
Let me know.
Okay.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think out of all of these, I'm glad that we're finishing with the Sand City because
that's the best one.
This one is I just took another sip and I'm like,
it's the best one.
This is the best beer.
They're doing great work. I mean, they're killing it.
Really
good.
They're
killing it. Yeah,
they're great.
I think I told this story before we hit record, but I was in my kitchen and I was grabbing two of these Sand Cities to bring over, and I'm getting them out of a drawer in my fridge. And it just brushed up against the top of the drawer and popped open. And I thought to myself, all right, I'm kind of late.
Beer is spraying everywhere.
Beer spraying everywhere. I'm I'm kind of late getting to Joe's place. But at the same time, amazing beer is spraying everywhere. What do?
You made the right call.
So I started shotgunning beer as if I was in high school, where you
you reverted to your primal instincts
the side of the beer.
And you were correct.
We're lucky to have them. They're doing great stuff.
Yeah, I'm sold.
There's something similar to writing, similar to music. I guess something we kept coming back to in this episode was my experience with music seems to sync up really well with the kinds of balancing acts that you talk about in writing. And I think the commonality is not in the craft itself necessarily, but in the fact that it's humans doing the craft,
Right.
Because I feel the same thing when I taste an amazing beer. One of the reasons that the Trillium DDH Fort Point is just tagged in my memory as my favorite beer.
It's a great one, yeah.
I remember I was sitting in my room, me and my girlfriend were watching Netflix, and I brought up a can of this Fort Point. I had gone on a beer trip up through New England.
Yeah, as have I.
And so it was very fresh. We opened it, I poured it, and, we were very present moment, just finished our work for the night, watching Netflix, the deal, instead of a short story reading. And I took a sip of this beer, and it was like this, almost like listening to Bach spiritual moment, right?
Right.
And I don't think that it's I think the commonality is that it's something interacting with the human brain. It's not music and writing and then everything else is something different. I think if you talk to really accomplished cooks, if you talk to accomplished beer brewers, musicians, writers, artists,
painters, sculptors, right.
What you see is they all have used the same or similar language to talk about the craft, to talk about, if anything, what they learned about themselves through learning the craft, And all the people I love hanging out with are people that have gone down the rabbit hole in something. It doesn't even matter what the thing is.
Yeah. Well, I mean, two thoughts. One is that I think it's as crazy as the comp seems. I think it's unsurprising that word craft shows up again in craft beer, because there is, again, the connotations of putting in the work. I mean, the idea being that this beer is better because people have put in the work.
Right.
And then the second thing being, what I tell my students is it's all about process. If you can convince the reader or the listener or whatever that the thing that they're about to spend time with is worth their time, then you have them. And that only comes from putting the time in. And so people who spend all that time practicing the violin, working out the whatever they do, the hops with the beer,
the recipes,
working out the sentences and the writing, those people have developed a reverence for what they do, and they are on a certain level serious people. And I feel like a lot of times we get bummed out by the world because we feel like we're surrounded by people who aren't serious, who are just doing things and saying things because they can, but not because they've thought about
in
them
a reactionary
or put time
way
into them. And it just bums you out. And then you spend time with a musician or a writer, or maybe even a brewer, and it's clear that that person has put in a lot of time and cares a lot about her craft. And you think to yourself, okay, well, you're a serious person. You are worth my time.
Yeah. It's like a level of trust, too, I feel like, because my favorite writers, I always feel like, as I start reading them, pretty much off the bat, there's, even if, like you said, I'm not entirely convinced right away, but there's like sentence level stuff going on where I'm like, okay, it's this like trust where I'm like, I'm convinced that you're good at what you do.
That's right.
And like, you're going to take me somewhere that I haven't been to, or that
trust.
I'm going to get somewhere where like it's worthwhile for me, because I know that, like you're saying, you've put in the time, and I think that's true of most artistry in general, right?
I remember a trumpet teacher at a masterclass once said, "You have to put the audience in a dream state," and
nice.
It was the trumpet player played something, and then I was just watching, which I learned so much more from watching a masterclass than playing in one, because like when you're playing in one, you're all caught up in your own like ego bullshit. When you're watching, you just get to absorb it all. And so the guy was playing, and then he sort of just, in trumpet, unfortunately, one of the things is you have to empty out the water that accumulates in your instrument.
I've seen you do that like so many times where you're just like,
and on the Baroque trumpets, it's even more disturbing. You have to like turn it upside down and whatever. So he just, I guess he did it in a way that was, he broke character, And she was like, don't, you had us. Like, you were playing so beautifully, and then you were just like... And she was like, and then I remembered I'm in a recital hall at a university watching a trumpet player, But for a moment, I was like in this moment of the music, and you could have kept us, but you lost us,
Right,
It's like, I was telling him about the Fort Point beer, where it honestly reminded me of a musical chord, the way it hit my tongue. It had a front that was so edgy that if it kept going in that direction, I would have spit it out of my mouth. Right. But then all of a sudden it transitioned into this middle of just juicy sweetness. And then at the end it just had the tickle of like champagne, like that kind of carbonation.
And guess how they figured that out? Trial and error.
Because they probably made a lot of beer that they did spit out. You know?
Well, and, Trillium is sort of Bach-like in that. I may be the first person to make that.
I don't think that sentence
may be a soundbite.
That sentence may have not been uttered in history.
Bach-like in that you drink their stuff and it is clean, it is on point, it gets you from A to B. I mean, there is no messiness, there is no bullshit. I mean, it is all like
and you can always get it. That's what I love about it.
It's on point.
Yeah.
If you go there, you can get it. You don't have to wait online for like 3 hours to get Trillium,
So
they've managed to scale up.
When is it happening?
Oh, well, so my girlfriend's going to be up at Tanglewood in Lenox, Massachusetts all summer.
Great.
So, and she has a house up there now.
Is she going to be there for the summer?
Yeah, 2 months.
She's going to see the BSO.
Yeah, she'll be playing with them and stuff like that.
Whoa! Wow!
Yeah.
It's like a program
Terrific.
with the BSO.
Oh, that's amazing.
So,
Great.
and she got
What
an
does she play?
Violin.
Oh, wow!
So
I'm a big Andres Nelson's fan. So.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's cool. He reminds me of he almost looks like he's like a creature from the Shire or something.
Yeah,
like,
but you listen. The way he
We'll link it in the description.
the way he talks about music is
what,
the way
the Shire?
Sure.
the way he talks about the music is the way I want the conductor of my symphony talking about music.
Sure,
Where
yeah.
it's just so felt, it's so energetic, it's so sincere.
And the way he conducts. So, in terms of conducting, right? Like, you can have the same conversation we've had about technique versus lyricism, about structure versus expressivity, right? All this stuff. For a conductor, you see that there's a whole spectrum of people that are just very structured to expressive, right? And the job of a conductor is a lot of things. One of them is to show the beat. That's what most people think of a conductor. But when people wonder and they ask musicians, like, what are you looking at when you look at the conductor? My answer is always, like, mostly their eyes.
Oh, that's interesting.
You get the emotional information from their eyes, right?
Huh.
The other data from like the way their hands are moving are kind of going in the side of my eyes. You know, they're like I'm seeing it, but mostly I'm looking at how. And when I say their eyes by eye contact, of course it means like their eyebrows and like their facial wrinkles and how they're. But the way a conductor looks at you tells you everything about the sound you have to make. Mahler 5 opening, right? That famous trumpet. Da-ga-da-dum,
Yeah.
da-ga-da-dum. The way conductors come out for that piece, they'll come out, they'll bow, right? And then they almost always put their head down,
Right.
and then they look up like this.
Yeah.
Like, because they had to put their head down and then find
For those
the
of you
Mahler energy.
who can't see, he just zoned the fuck in
He really did.
hard.
And as a trumpet player, you know, that could obviously freak you the fuck out if Andres Nelson stares at you like that, right?
Yeah.
And he does it in a way, like, for him, his body language is very, like, I just kicked beer over.
He
Sorry.
did.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, but that's how emphatic his body
He's
language is.
way in on Andres Nelson right now.
It's like this, right?
He's in a football stance.
Yeah. For those of you who can't
Well,
see.
are we not video yet, Joe?
Not quite yet.
yeah.
If you like, share, and subscribe on Patreon, though, we could do
I
it.
love when you get drunker,
I
Joe.
can't say
You say
subscribe.
like, share, subscribe, and you go like, share, subscribe.
Because I'm laughing and also a little drunk.
So I really like Andres Nelson. I will say I do not share his admiration of Shostakovich.
Sure.
It's just not my cup of tea.
A lot of
You know.
composers get like you get like the love-hate relationship. People either love them or hate them. Bruckner is another one. People either love
That's a good
Bruckner or
one.
hate Bruckner.
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah.
As a brass player, I have to love Bruckner. You know, he just writes like really difficult and
Right.
amazingly like
Right.
just fun to play like brass parts. But I've heard faculty at Stony Brook like say like, "Oh, Bruckner's bullshit," you know,
Right,
like,
right.
and I was like, well, that's a pretty intense sentence to
Yeah.
say, you know, like,
Yeah.
but you know,
Concise and intense.
it makes me want to reply like, when's the last time the New York Phil played one of your symphonies? But you know,
You just don't.
I don't. No,
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, good point. Like, what did I get on the paper? You know.
So while we have you here, how do you feel about the new conductor of the New York Phil? Give us your take. Has this been covered already? On
Job
the...
on
No,
Sweden?
Yeah, I don't think we've
give
covered
it to
that,
us.
yeah.
Give it to us.
Job van Sweden
Yeah.
guy. So I actually first saw his conducting up at Tanglewood.
Okay, great.
This was in 2012. I had
That's when he was doing Houston or something. Is that right?
he was still in Houston,
Yeah.
and he was actually conducting the TMC orchestra. So Tanglewood Music Center is the students who come there, and they sort of sub in and out of the BSO occasionally. Boston Symphony members will come and play with them. So he was conducting a few BSO concerts, and he conducted Tchaikovsky's Fourth Symphony up there. I actually still have the video somewhere in my Gmail somewhere.
Okay.
I took a video of him conducting Tchaikovsky's Fourth Symphony opening. He's extremely intense.
Okay.
Like, obviously, you guys listening at home can't see the gestures, but his the way his arms move are and this is what I love about music. Every time I try to describe it, I can't quite find the words, you know?
Sure.
But, so the opening of the Tchaikovsky Symphony is, you know, dun, da 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 dun, dun, dun.
His arms are moving
dun,
erratically.
dun, 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 dun. And this guy,
Yeah.
the way he gives an
It's making
upbeat
scary faces.
is
Yeah.
so he,
I'm scared.
like, the upbeat is so intense, and it says everything about how the downbeat should be.
Right. And,
When-
and how great cocaine is.
I don't think he's a coke guy.
I don't think he's a coke guy either. Something tells me
He's
he's not
pretty
a coke
straight
guy.
edge.
So he channels his coke rage through conducting.
I saw him eating ice cream once with his wife. He was very lovely.
Close enough. I'll take it.
But, you know, I think when
But I can't tell. Are you a fan or not? Are you-
I am a fan.
Okay,
I mean, I don't
okay.
know him personally. I know he got into
You saw
some-
him eating ice cream with his wife.
Yeah, I'm a fan of ice cream.
Pretty intimate.
as you
yeah,
know.
yeah, no, that's in deep.
I think he got into some trouble when he was in Houston with, like, being so intense that he would, like, you know, basically, you know, call out a specific player and then ask them to leave on the dress rehearsal, things like that.
Wow.
When they first said he was coming to New York, my first thought was, like, good, because a lot of times, you know, the New York Phil gets called out for being too emotionless, too technical, too dry, let's say. And I thought that's going to sort of change that dynamic a little bit. I saw him do Mahler 1 with New York Phil a couple years ago. This was before he was officially the music director. And I thought he made the orchestra sound better. He has an intensity while standing on the podium that makes everybody a combination of scared and inspired, you know?
I have heard, and I don't know anything about anything, but I have heard that Mahler 1 performance was his unofficial audition.
Yeah, and that's usually how it works. Like, if you're going to be offered a big job, they obviously can't have you sign the dotted line before you know, wield your wand in front of the musician, so to speak.
Right. Yeah.
Even
In practice.
if you win a trumpet job, they often have a trial week. They'll often pick 2 winners, and then one winner will play a trial week.
Wow. Yeah.
Seriously, yeah. When they were trying to pick a principal trumpet for New York, because the guy retired who was the principal trumpet there forever, Phil Smith, basically the really young kid, Matt Muckey, who won the job when he was fucking 21 years old. He won 3rd trumpet position.
How much you hate that guy?
I don't hate anybody.
But if you had to hate somebody, come on, dude.
Do you mean if I had to murder somebody and take their place in the world?
Right.
You know?
Yeah,
Like,
steal
sure,
their
that would be like
yeah.
on the
Steal their
list.
face
Yeah.
and their
Right.
identity.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
It would be on the list. Yeah.
You'd be top.
What was
3.
that film, the Mr. Ripley one or whatever? The Talented Mr. Ripley? That's your Talented Mr.
Yeah.
Ripley.
Sure,
guy.
okay.
Yeah, you're good. Yeah.
So apparently what they did was when they were bringing in, like, prospective first trumpet players, which that's a big job. It gets $300,000 a year, the principal trumpet job in the New York Phil.
What?
Oh, yeah.
I love how
That's
we're-
how much a trumpet player makes?
I love
That's how much
I
the
love
principal
we're
trumpet
getting
in the
into
New York Phil
New York
makes.
Phil conspiracies.
It's not a conspiracy. It's just the salary.
That's
Just
exactly
another
what a good
week.
conspiracy theorists would say.
Well,
Go
I am
on.
so impressed by the salary of the principal.
Do you know what the highest paid orchestral musician in the United States is?
I obviously have no idea.
$1,001,000, the concertmaster of Cleveland Orchestra.
Wait, he literally makes $1 million.
I don't know if it's still the case, but I know that he had in his contract that he had to be the highest paid
But
orchestral musician.
that-
Oh, and somebody else was making $1 million.
yeah.
but hold on,
Not in the mic though.
Nevertheless,
that orchestra has to play in Miami in the winter because they can't sustain themselves in Cleveland. I mean, how can they pay that guy?
They're one of the top 5 in the country. They have big budget. I would say the biggest budget orchestra in terms of, like, financially healthy is Boston. I remember going to a seminar at Tanglewood where they were talking about why the BSO budget is so healthy, and one of the reasons is they own their concert hall, so they don't have to rent it out.
Which is a beautiful space if you haven't been to
Oh,
it.
beautiful space, yeah.
Yeah.
Another reason is, like, the whole Tanglewood aspect.
That's a
is
cash cow. It has to be.
It's a cash cow, but it's also, like, it makes the job, when you win a job in BSO, like, of course you have to play all summer, but most orchestras have some kind of summer thing.
And Nelson spends a third of the year in Leipzig.
Yeah, yeah. I what I love about, you know, just to bring it full circle, what I love about like listening to different orchestras and different conductors is you could play different recordings as long as there's some brass going on. I could probably guess which orchestra you're playing.
Well, that's really cool. That's really cool.
String players could do the same. They could say, that sounds like the Cleveland strings. That sounds like New York Phil strings.
Right.
There's a subtlety to any craft, and I'm sure with writing, like, there's aspects that you can't even quite put words to, but you can say, that sounds like a Vonnegut sentence.
Well, you could put words to it, but it's all solitary. I mean, that's what's so interesting about these orchestras and symphonies is that they have a communal sound, right? So, I mean, you're saying the BSO has a different sound from the New York Phil, has a different sound from Cleveland, has a different sound from Chicago, has a different sound from L.A. and their hotshot guy.
Yeah.
Like, all those has a different sound from, Gewandhaus or whatever, from Vienna. I mean, that all these different orchestras and symphonies have different sounds, even though there are like 80 people in them.
And even though they're playing
crazy.
the same
music.
music.
I mean, that's crazy.
Right.
Yeah.
And then those orchestras will their sounds will evolve if a new conductor rolls in. And,
of course.
And especially if that conductor's not a passive conductor, but they're very active.
Right.
They demand certain sounds, right?
Yeah, depending on the vibe that they want to go for.
Exactly.
That's who they'll recruit.
Exactly.
And I think it's good for the BSO that Nelson's spending that time in Leipzig, but I mean, obviously, that's crazy. I mean, the guy's like basically doing 2 symphonies now.
Yeah, I mean those really big conductors, like they're just all over the place, I can't quite imagine. Like, I remember hearing a pretty big conductor say once, like, it's really hard to be a conductor. You have to know everything.
Of course you do.
It's like,
yeah, it's crazy.
Because like to interpret a big scale like a Mahler, it's like every aspect that you start to study about the score will lead you down a rabbit hole of like weeks of studying, Right. But then you also have to know when to like put a roadblock there and go back and be I have rehearsal tomorrow.
Do your other stuff.
Well, there's that amazing Simpsons episode where Homer's watching the symphony and his line is something to the effect of, "Could that bassoon have come in any later?" But I mean,
touche,
it's like,
Homer.
You're listening to 80 people or whatever,
Yeah.
and it's like, how are you listening to that? It's crazy.
And so there are conductors over the years that are especially famous for having amazing ears.
Of course.
So one of them is Gunther Schuller. And I was at Tanglewood watching a rehearsal. He was conducting, I think, it may have been one of his pieces, but I forget. But his ear is insane. Like, it was a very thick contemporary piece, very atonal. And he just stopped and he was just like, like third trumpet, like, why'd you play an F natural?
Yeah.
And it's
That's
like, how
wild.
the fuck did you hear
wild.
that?
That's crazy.
Those kinds of things.
I do think if I were in the Marvel universe and I had a superpower, it would be the ability to identify good sentences. I think that's my superpower. I think I could pull out a sentence and be like, this is why this sentence is good. This is why this sentence is not good.
But for yourself, or to be able to express that to others?
In the world.
Yeah.
Like sentences
Now, so someone's
written.
robbing a bank and you pop into the wall, you bust through, and you're like...
Kool-Aid Man
That's
style.
right, but you read one sentence at a time. When you're conducting a symphony, you're listening to, ostensibly 80 sentences at once.
Sure.
It's crazy.
Or, I mean, so when it comes to certain types of music, you have, like, homophony, which is, like, one melodic line with, like, a structured harmony. But then you have polyphony, which is like Bach, right?
Yeah.
You have 4, maybe 5 independently moving lines.
I know.
And in this sense, they have this really beautiful definition of harmony. In music, we generally have melody, which is the tune you sing, and harmony, which is the accompaniment. But when you listen to Bach, you get the truest sense of harmony, which is that harmony is frozen counterpoint. Harmony is frozen melodies. So you have 4 independent melodies, and then if you were to freeze a moment in time, you would say that's, a G chord or whatever.
Right.
But really, you had this sense of 4 snaking independent lines, and you're like, how the hell is Bach going to get us back to the key we're in? How is he going to get to tonic?
Yeah.
And yet, there we are, right, with the timpani, bung, and we get to the D major chord at the end of, B minor mass, and you just think that's God, something deep like that.
It ain't Netflix.
No.
Just,
I have to say, I mean, it's not classical, but you listen to symphonic pop, you listen to something like the Beach Boys, they're trying to do the same thing on a simpler level.
Sure.
And
That's
it's,
a really interesting
it's moving,
example,
you know?
yeah.
I mean, you listen to
Well, that's
someone,
why it's catchy.
That's
right?
why it works. But
Yeah,
it's the same.
for sure.
It's the same thing that he was talking about. It's that you've got like 4 different things going on. You're trying to layer them over each other, make them all come back to the same ending point.
Right.
Yeah. Joe, should we give him a few rapid fire questions?
Yeah. Oh, rapid fire.
Rapid fire and
Which
of
is
an
a
interview
little
question?
outrageous, by the way. There's no beer for these rapid fire questions.
I know. It's a
Not
shame.
one.
Are we legit out of beer?
I could check, but I'm pretty sure we.
I
All
All
have
right,
the
give me the
fee.
rapid fire questions.
We'll just we'll do it.
Give them
We'll just do it.
All right, let's go. Rapid
So
fire.
a
Let's
few
go.
of these I've picked up on from listening to other podcasts, like whatever. Everything
Oh, really?
everybody does is stolen from somewhere.
Yeah,
Okay.
Simpsons did it. Yeah.
But here's one of the favorite ones I've always heard, which is, can you think of the time you've laughed hardest in your life?
3 seconds, go.
Slap shot.
Okay, that was an answer. Fuck, I don't have any questions.
Feel free to elaborate.
Slapshot is a Paul Newman film from the late 70s about ice hockey that could not, for a million reasons, be made today.
I see.
Interesting.
I'll have to check that out.
Butter
it
side
out.
up or butter side down, go.
What is butter side down?
That wasn't the question.
What is what?
Wait, I'm sorry. Did we say our rapid fire
What is
questions
butter
can have a
side?
follow up?
What is butter side down?
You eat the toast with the buttered side.
People do that?
Psychos, yeah.
That's like saying
What?
cold shower or
Yeah.
like regular shower.
Is this like a trick question?
No, it's a Dr. Seuss question, actually.
Okay, well, whatever. No, up.
Up? Yeah. Okay.
All right,
Okay.
Luke, go.
If you had if you were to have one career path that wasn't the one you're doing as a writer,
right.
what do you think it
Left-handed
would be?
pitcher for the Boston Red Sox.
Oh,
Left-handed, I like that. That's a good answer.
are you a left-handed person?
No, but but that's the right answer. That's
Oh, that's
definitely
the left answer.
that's definitely the right answer. All right, no hands or no feet, go.
I guess no feet.
Yeah, that's what the trouble with a good would you rather. Like, would you rather have no hands or no feet? It's like when you give that sigh that you just gave.
Yeah.
It's the sigh of like,
Right.
"Ugh, both suck
Yeah.
so equally.
Neither
I
is good.
trust robotics more with feet than hands, I guess is what it comes down
I
to.
disagree. I've
All
seen
right.
Terminator.
That's a great
Claws,
sentence.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's fair.
No, but like in 2018, I would trust robot feet more than I would trust robot hand.
All right,
Not like
Luke,
trust,
go.
like
Next-
I don't think my robot hand would like attack me. I just
It
mean
might.
like
We
the
don't
foot
know.
could just be a stub.
No hands is tough for a writer.
Yeah,
That's tough.
But you could dictate. Like,
also-
like
It's
fucking,
not the same. You know that. It's
no,
not the
like
same.
Paradise Lost style. Come on.
Yeah,
Like just
right.
be blind
He's
to
full of
dictating.
shit. All right, so quick sidebar. Milton claimed that he had the
Yeah.
Holy Ghost in his ear,
Right, yeah.
given it to him uninterrupted.
Yeah.
Come on.
And he dictated to his
Stop.
wife, right?
Stop.
Isn't that what happened?
Yeah, or no, his daughters.
Oh, really?
His daughters, whom he slavishly made learn Greek and Latin when they were like 5 years old.
Ah, checks out.
that's how you fucking learn a language when you're young,
Yeah.
though.
The Milton plan.
Do you
Yeah.
speak a second language at all?
No, I studied Latin when I was in college, and I speak Spanish extremely poorly, but I don't fluently speak a second language, no.
Was that a rapid fire question?
I mean, it was just a question.
I answered it rapid fire.
No ears or no nose. Go. I don't know why I'm taking away his body parts.
Yeah, Joe's rapid fire. You're just trying to be a genie in training.
I know.
I'm gonna get rid of the nose. I mean, I will say quickly as a follow up to that the Gogol story, the nose.
Oh, that's right.
That's a great one.
That's a weird story.
It's a weird one, you know. It's a really
Yeah.
great. I mean, that's the thing about those Russians. The thing.
Yeah,
I'm
they
going to
get-
go
they-
so far off the rapid fire. You just have to
No,
indulge
that's
me for a
fine.
sec.
That's
but
fine.
the thing about Russia in the early 90s, a thing about Russia in the
The
early
one singular thing about Russia.
You don't want to offend our 2 Russian downloaders.
in the early 19th
'Cause they're
century
hardcore.
is that they didn't have this shared collective literary artistic history because Russia as we think of it today just didn't like come together like that, and so their cultural and artistic history as we conceive of it, at least as Americans, really was from like the early 1800s to the early 1900s, and in that 100-year period they just smoked the whole world. They were
Right.
like, what do you want to do?
Yeah.
You want to write fiction? We got it. You want to write poetry? We got it. You want to write classical music? We're there. You want to do avant-garde art? We're on it. Like, you want to do ballet? We're right there, too. Like, for 100 years, they just killed it, despite not really having a robust tradition. They just took all of the, like, coldness and misery and weirdness of that place and channeled it into artistic excellence that the world has never known. It's amazing. And Gogol's right at the beginning of it. Gogol's like, you know, Agent Zero or whatever. I mean,
and he didn't have a nose?
I mean, Pushkin is probably like... Pushkin's probably like the, like, basically the first guy.
Yeah.
But among fiction writers, Gogol's probably the first one. Yeah. It's crazy.
All right, well...
Where do you stand on the whole God thing? What do you think happens when you die?
That's not a rapid fire.
I said it pretty rapid fire.
Jesus H.
Walt Whitman. Can I quote Walt Whitman? Is that allowed?
Definitely.
Yes, absolutely.
In the mysteries of God, we dare not dally.
That's a good way to end the podcast, I think.
I think so. We can't hang up on him, though.
Okay, yeah, we usually play this hang up game with Johnny, but unfortunately Johnny couldn't make it today. So how do you hang up on a human in person? Do you just walk away?
Yeah, I think we just go and leave him.
Sounds cold.
Yeah, I do have to pee pretty bad, so I think I'm going to go walk away and do that.
Thanks,
we could just say thank you for joining us.
Yeah, we could do the normal thing, yeah.
Did we set the Thunk Tank podcast record for references to Leipzig?
We definitely set that. We also set the Thunk Tank podcast record for references to Billy Joel tennis.
Yep, we topped that list for sure.
We probably set a few records depending on how you define that.
And in fact, if you're able to pick them all out, listener, you can subscribe on Patreon and be a winner. Luke, just fucking roll with it.
Joe goes into Patreon character. He just says bullshit and like
someone has to. Yeah.
All right. Thanks for listening, guys. Thanks for having a conversation with us.
Thank you for having me.
It was very fun, and we'll see you next time. We got some episodes coming up. One is Seinfeld analysis.
Oh, we got some good ones coming up.
Another one is we're going to have our friend Nathan back on.
Yeah.
And kind of ask him the same kind of questions, but he's a music composer. We're going to ask him about how he...
Hold on, I know Nathan. You should make him talk about short fiction as much as I talked about music.
That's a great
fair
idea.
Point.
Yeah.
Very, very fair point.
We're going to take you up on that.
He's actually collaborates a lot with a writer named Ben Laurie, who I just read a short story.
Talk about weird
called
stuff.
The Snake in the Throat or something like that. Have you read that one, Joe?
No, but I've read some of his stuff and I'm like...
It's so short. Like I also read it at a bar.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm at bars a lot. I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah, we should ask him about that.
Yeah.
And you know, and if you guys have ideas for topics you want us to talk about,
like,
hit us up. Email, Twitter, Facebook, all the internet shit.
Yeah, all the Insta hashtaggings.
I really feel weird not being able to hang up on Johnny.
You can hang up on me. So I'm going to start talking about Cassius's reign.
No, the way I hang up
Cassius was really all about being